It says philanthropists, but really this group is made up of folks that are philanthropists, sure, but they're really mainly volunteers and they're advocates for the arts. And they're all people that are passionate. And what I thought we would do is maybe have each of them, I'm going to introduce them now so you'll know who they are. And for those that have the program that shows the names of the panel, I'm doing them in the same order that they're seated. The first is David Aisenstat. David Aisenstat, and we span the country. David's here from Vancouver. He also heads up a very popular restaurant chain called Keg Restaurants, but he also has a past that includes being chairman of the Vancouver Art Gallery. Very active in the arts. On his left is Robert Foster. Robert Foster is a vice chair of Business for the Arts, and he's also been involved with an organization called Artscape that he chairs in Toronto that helps provide spaces for artists on reasonable terms. And he is from Toronto, so we have Vancouver, Toronto, and then we go to the middle of the country. Is that right, Jean? Jean Giguère, who is from Winnipeg, is a past chair of the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, again very active in the arts and a board member of Business for the Arts. Cheryl Hudson is on her left, and she is with the Mike and Karen Vukets Foundation, and a very passionate and interested person involved in the arts. She's executive director of that organization. Then we have Andrew Molson, who is from Montreal, so we're down in Montreal now, is very involved in many organizations in Montreal, and is also best known as being extremely involved in the Northern Ballet, Great Northern Ballet Company, which he will explain when he gets on. And then Gail O'Brien, who is from Calgary and Toronto, very involved with the National Arts Centre. So you have a panel with a broad geographic range and a broad range of artistic endeavors and interests. And so we'll maybe start with them, and they can talk about maybe their aha moment. Why don't we do that? Just each of you, as you feel moved, come forward. Robert, you've reached for the mic.
My aha moment was reading the books by Richard Florida. I was very active in fundraising for a political party, and decided I wanted to do something.
That will not be named.
Well, yeah, which will be named, particularly today. And I had read Richard Florida's first 3 books, and then lo and behold, he came to Toronto. I met him, and I said, Richard, I want to be the guy who implements your theory in Toronto. So if you haven't read Richard Florida, his first book, which has been revised and reissued, The Rise of the Creative Class, I highly recommend to you as young, budding participants in this whole game. You will find it stimulating, invigorating, and it will give you a philosophy and a reason for what you will do, and certainly I find it renewing on a constant basis.
Great, Robert. Who would like to go next?
I go. No. Okay. I was born and raised in Montreal, and the youngest of the family, and the family was trying to get me away from my big ambition was to be the first female goalie for the Canadiens. So they made sure that aside from being involved in sports, that I was involved in all the arts that they were involved in. So they introduced me to everything. But my aha moment was when my first job after university in the travel industry, and I was transferred to Winnipeg in February. And Iron Maiden, that song, a stranger in a strange place and cold and ice and alone and away from home, would best describe me in those times. But I had, I got another kick in the butt from my family, and I said, you look around, this is the cultural center of the country, and there's so many things going on there, and this is where you should, plug into it, buy tickets and go to the ballet and go to MTC and everything, and I did. And I actually stayed, I'm still in Winnipeg after all these years, because that community is full of volunteers. They support all of their arts. There's so many layers, like to the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, and then there's contemporary dancers, and there's another dance group below that. The same with the symphony, there's so many layers to it that it's just so vibrant, and it's the kind of city you can get around in 17 minutes. You can get to a hockey game, you can get to the concert hall, and you can get to the ballet. So it became very, very attractive. And then it was the door opening to me to a whole new community and a whole new province, and actually the West. And it opened up being with the ballet that when I ended up at the ballet that. There were so many opportunities for personal growth that helped me on a personal level with new ideas and new pushing myself to be involved. And also it was good for the business that I was in. And so that was my thing, and I've never looked back. You know, I'm a born-again Winnipegger, and the ballet company, for instance, has been to 600 cities in 44 countries around the world. So it's introduced me to all kinds of ballet and dance markets around the world because I traveled with them a lot. And I think that would be the most defining one for me.
Okay. Cheryl.
Well, for me,
And Cheryl is from Toronto.
for me, my aha moment was, I believe it was one of those Richard Florida meetings. Nicole Anderson invited me to a roundtable, and the discussion was why business doesn't support the arts, and it was a discussion to this, we were discussing the barriers to giving for business. And we heard some of those this morning, all the reasons why business is reluctant to give to the arts. But then Charlie Bailey, who was the former chair of the TD Bank, he got up and he said in his, I used to work for the TD Bank, in his quiet, very measured voice, he said, it's because they don't understand and they don't know how to connect the dots to transformation. And it was, to me, that was wow. It wasn't about all the reasons why we should be supporting, we should be competing, and it wasn't about health, and it wasn't about education, but it was about how the arts empowers education, and how the arts supports well-being, and how the arts create economic resilience and emotional resilience. So that was my moment when I thought I have to be part of this.
Andrew.
Bonjour tout le monde. My aha moment probably happened when I was in Quebec City. I was studying law in Quebec City, and this is in the 90s. And I had majored in art history at university before going into law. And I decided to stay in Quebec City for the summertime and find a job. And I found a job at an art gallery that sold Inuit art. And I was the #1 salesman. I was really good at selling, and I was selling in both languages. They wanted people who could be bilingual. When the ships came in, we wanted to sell some nice big pieces. But I discovered one artist while I was selling, fell for him, and then sort of made my first acquisition, if you will, on this artist. And this artist was totally inspired by Henry Moore. And I loved that. I loved the fact that this artist from northern Quebec was fascinated by Henry Moore, and you look at his pieces and you can think of Henry Moore. And each of his pieces, he writes the title underneath, and that made me think of Marcel Duchamp. So it sort of brought back all of my studies. And of course, I didn't study Inuit art in art history class, so that's why. Cheers.
But tell us about that ballet company you're with.
The Great Northern Ballet Company is hockey.
Gail?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And before I start, I just want to say how unbelievably exciting it is to see all of you young people here today, passionate about the arts, and it makes me feel very, very confident about the future sustainability. I would just say I am very involved, have been for many years at the National Arts Centre, and we've recently done had some concern around the gray-haired audience that increasingly came to our concert halls and our theater halls, and we've been trying to figure out how to engage a younger group of people. And so when I see all of you, I can see where those future audiences are coming from, and it's just unbelievably exciting. So it's really such a pleasure to be here. Anyway, my aha moment. I grew up in Montreal, moved out west to Calgary with my husband, and spent basically 30 years there in the fashion business. And I at towards the end of that period, I had this sort of feeling, a little bit of social responsibility that I should be giving back to the community, since fashion isn't exactly going to save the world. As much as I loved it, but it wasn't going to save the world. So I became involved with a major arts organization in the city, which I enjoyed very much, and chaired its development committee. And my aha moment really comes around arts sustainability, because that organization hit a bump in the road financially. And the leader of the organization was an academic and a marketer, and didn't really connect with the mission of the organization. And when he left, the organization had started to slide. CEO number 2 was a brilliant artist and curator, had no idea how to run a business, and it started to go in free fall. And the third CEO was sort of a panicked, sort of a Band-Aid solution, not the right experience and not a leader, and really the case was sealed. It has taken years and years and years for that organization to come back. I understand it's on the right path now. But my aha moment was, what does really good arts leadership look like? And I've had the very good fortune in the last number of years to understand what makes a really good leader. And I think it is the mixture of a right-brain person who has that artistic connection and understanding and experience, and may or may not be an artist, he or she may not be an artist themselves, but it's also connected with the left-brain side, which is more business and management skills. And together, they're able to manage an organization which has to deal with so many different stakeholder groups, including artists, there's donors, there's government, but they have to be able to manage both those relationships and also have a vision that steers the organization forward, which I don't think you're able to get if you don't have that artistic kind of DNA. I have had the privilege to work alongside one of those leaders, and I would have to say, Business for the Arts this year has recognized that as an important force in the arts by creating an award for the best arts leadership in the country. And as you probably all know, named after Peter Herndorf, and he was the initial recipient.
Right.
So that was my aha moment.
Thank you, Gail.
Leadership important for sustainability in the arts.
David?
I don't know if I've had an aha moment per se. I mean, the beauty of art to me is there are so many aha moments. Initially just a little kid just appreciating it, and to this day appreciating it is sort of a number of aha moments all the time. And then in trying to help with it, there have been a number of aha moments in terms of what great work some people have done with some institutions and in some fields and everything else. And again, if you try and be helpful, every now and then you get an aha, is here something I can do that I hadn't known about or not expected I'd be able to do. And it's those series of things that keeps it so interesting going forward, rather than a single aha moment, I guess.
Well, mine is easy. My aha moment was the moment I realized I had no artistic talent. And I felt if I had no artistic talent, at least maybe I could help those that do have it to fulfill their dreams and their aspirations and their capabilities. So and that was quite early, at quite an early age that I realized I didn't have that talent. I played in a piano in Montreal, in fact. I lived here when I was very young. I think I was 5 or 6 years old. And I played in some piano recital, and I think I played as Mickey Mouse. And I think I had a glove on each hand that only had 4 fingers, which may be why my talent wasn't realized. But my major contribution to the arts, which I will pass on to this younger generation, is something called the Fleck-Flinch test. The Fleck-Flinch test is at that moment where a prospect asks you how much you're looking for, and you look them in the eyes and you say $10,000. And if there's no perceptible flinch, you say a year for 5 years. Whereas if they kind of go, then you say it's spread over 5 years. Now, Jane is one from the NAC that would know this well, because one of the challenges in fundraising is determining what the capacity is. So that is a patented process, but I'm giving it to all of you today. Now, I thought that what we might do, free things up a bit, is see if there's any questions that come out of the group here, and we'll react to what interests you.
Jim, in the meantime, if I might
Yes,
supplement your comment, one piece of advice that I've shared with many is if you want money from somebody, go to them and ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask them for money. Now, Shannon Litzenberger's in the audience, and she was telling somebody about a dance thing she was doing, and she looked at me and said, "Remember, I came and I asked for advice first."
Any queries from this? Is it too soon after lunch? I don't see any hands.
We've got a question over there.
Okay, over there, carry on.
I think a lot of young patrons don't see true representation of that demographic on boards. So I'm often asked by various people in terms of how to engage this group, and my response to them in many cases is, where is board representation, but also where is a legacy mechanic or mechanism that we could get behind? So love to get your thoughts on board representation for call it the 40 and under demographic, and if there are some great examples that you've seen either in Canada or abroad.
Go ahead.
Jean?
We at the Ballet at one time, we understand exactly what you're saying, that we sat down as a nominating committee and asked that very question, and how do we solve it? And we actually made a list of prospects that we thought would be very interested in supporting the arts. And if not the ballet company, then the theater or the Winnipeg Art Gallery or some of the smaller things. And so we ended up with half of our board was under 40. And the challenges with that, and they were fabulous, and they did their full term. And the one thing we had to do was to adjust our governance model and our demands on the board, because they were young, with young families. They had hockey tournaments to go with their kids, and they had commitments to their work. They're on the way on the ladder on the way up, and so their commitments were a lot different from everybody from 50 and up. So we just adjusted the expectations, and we never looked back. It was I think it's still in existence now, and we set a model for other boards, not only in Manitoba, but BC did the same thing and same thing. So it really is a point of just sitting down and addressing it, and being willing to adjust it to suit the new demographic.
I just wanted to add to that. I think it's very important for the employers of these young professionals to be very open-minded about the willingness to give time to these institutions. So that's a work in progress too. And when you do get the time and you get the respect for giving that, and they say it's actually good for you to do that, you get even better talent on your board.
Gail?
The other approach to having younger representation on the board I have actually seen in action, and it is about accessing skills that are seen as very important in driving the results of the organization. And in particular, I'm speaking about digital skills, social media skills. Everyone recognizes that that's very, very important with all kinds of stakeholder groups. And so people are actually recruiting to the boards people who have those skills, because the older folks are not so great, and we really need that help. So there's probably other skills that young people have that would also be very valuable. For sure, the tech, digital, social media skills are of great value.
Okay, and I should mention that, just for sure, that Business for the Arts itself, first of all, as I'm sure you've seen in Representatives Business for the Arts, is quite a young group. Maybe some of us are a little older, but most of the folks that are working in business with the arts are quite young, and we have a dynamic CEO that is still south of some age, which I'm not going to guess. And that we, of course, have a program called Board Link, which tries to help bring young professionals and the arts together. And I'm sure Nicole would be happy to explain that to anybody. Now, was there an additional comment here, Cheryl?
At Michael Vukets and Associates, we sponsor the Arnold Award, and as many of you know, that is the award for a young professional under the age of 40 who has committed themselves to volunteering in the arts. So we get asked quite often to recommend names of young professionals when boards are looking. There was a time when I would believe the priority for joining a board would have been economics, or to widen the circle and bring your circle to the board for financial. But what we're seeing with a lot of young professionals, as Gail mentioned, there are a lot of skills that are very, very important to the development of a board, and discovering and reinventing and finding those new models. So we're actively playing in that space, looking at young people and recommending them for boards. Soap Opera Theatre, we're involved with them, and we have recommended a few people, young people, to their board as well.
Okay.
Jim, I might suggest there's an organization that runs a program called Time Raiser. And Time Raiser is very effective at bringing together volunteers and organizations that are looking for young professionals 21 to 35 years of age. I might be presumptuous enough in front of its founder.
Who happens to be your son, right?
It happens to be my son, yes. To say that it was a brilliant idea. They get money from people like this panel. They take the money, they buy art from young emerging artists, they put it up in a room just like this. Young professionals like you come and you bid for the art with volunteer time. The bell goes, there are 40 organizations pre-selected in the middle, and you match your interests with the organization, and then as you serve your hours, you get your piece of art when you're done. And if I'm correct, Mr. Chair, you raise something like 12,000 volunteer hours per event, and you run events across Canada. I got it, okay. And Framework Foundation Time Raiser is an amazing way for all of you to find an organization that you care about and do it in a fun way.
What's the website name of that organization?
You know, well, I'll leave that to the moderator of the next.
Oh, I see. Okay, that'll cover it.
He's got your role next.
Yes, right here.
One of the amazing responsibilities that comes with being a board member, which we've sort of veered into board conversations, is obviously it comes with helping to choose the next leadership. It's a major responsibility for board members, and it's something that we often don't talk about, because in the sort of recruiting mode, sometimes we'll look at somebody's political capital or their ability to fundraise, but there's a huge responsibility around hiring a CEO or a new executive director. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the pleasures and the dangers of that work, and how you integrate with that with your sort of perspective as philanthropists as well.
That's a very, I mean, is it okay if I speak?
Sure.
It's a very, very important responsibility, and you could say the same thing if you're an S&P 500 company. I mean, it's the board of directors, their number one job is to pick the right person to run the show, and make sure that that person who's running the show is well advised by the board, gives support, as much support as we can. What can we put around our board to help this CEO do her job? So this is extremely important, and number one role. So when I was very lucky, for example, I'm on the board of the Banff Center, and I was very lucky to arrive just as they were selecting the next CEO. And that's a wonderful opportunity as a board member, because you go through the process of the hiring and the interviews, and then you volunteer with the CEO going forward. And so it's like a new day, but together. And I think that's very smart as well when you're recruiting board members and recruiting CEOs. And the other thing that I think is extremely important, and you mentioned it when you were talking about the focus on fundraising, focusing on politics. I think we need board members that are very also focused on the content that the CEO is overseeing, and you can't forget that. And it's extremely important to really understand the content, be it in health, be it in education, or be it in arts and culture.
Can I just add one small piece to that? I feel unbelievably strongly that board members need to understand that fundraising is also part of the role, as well as governance and as well as all of the oversight activities that you do. I've been on a board of an arts organization where it was felt that the board's role was governance. And they were shocked to understand that anyone should expect them to get engaged with trying to find ways to support the organization. I know it's changing a lot now, but I think it has to be written out right from the get-go.
The best way to fundraise, though, is to understand the content.
Yep.
I agree.
And to be able to sell the content. So you have to, and you agree. But I think that's extremely important. And that often we see boards that are more about fundraising capability, and they could be on the Carpet Foundation, selling carpets. But so you really have to be involved in the content.
Robert, you had a comment, did you? No.
I did. I totally agree. I think that the critical role for a board is to, aside from the fundraising and governance and everything, is to really understand the product and to be its advocate and its ambassador. You're the face of the board at all kinds of events and things like that, and so you should be bringing your organization with you all the time, and it's really a joy. The more you get to know about an organization, like how a ballet company works and how the school works and how kids audition from all around the world and end up in Winnipeg, and half of them don't speak the language or anything, and to be part of that, and it's an enormous amount of pride to be part of it, and also an enormous amount of pride for the community. And it's taking your community everywhere when those kids graduate. So you really need to know what you're selling and what you're advocating for. But it's a real critical role.
Yeah, my short phrase for the role of a board, I think the most important role has been mentioned, which is to appoint, but I also add disappoint, to appoint and disappoint CEOs. Because if a person isn't doing the job,
you got to act fast.
Need to make changes. And the other is to set the parameters within which management operates, and then let management operate. Don't try and micromanage. Too many boards get too involved. Okay. Now, there was a question just behind there. Yep.
My name is Jeanette Gaulin. I'm the executive director for Les Ballet Jazz, and in Montreal. What challenge we had this year is, when I took over, is that we have now a gap between, it's a family-based organization for 44 years with the Salbey family. And what we need to do now is to be able to get the organization to go ahead with new people who will be involved. We were lucky enough to have young people, and I think they're here, young people who organized 3 years ago a fundraising event, an event just cibled, an event that was just aimed at young people. And those people had parents who were already involved with the company. So what we did is that this event for the youth people was so great that it went on for 3 years. We're up to our 3rd year now. And what we did is that the people who were involved in organizing that soirée, we invited 2 of them to join the board. So, and they're here now. We have Stéphanie Rassam and Olivier Perron-Collins, who are here today. I'm really grateful that they get involved, but more importantly is the fact that they will be able to continue with the organization and to transmit the knowledge and the passion for the dance. So I think that might be one way of, for the Ballet Jazz to be there again in 50 years.
And also to have someone with your energy to help make it happen. Yes,
Question back
Chris.
there.
There's been an interesting debate happening around the idea that a lot of boards, especially with the major institutions across Canada, are somewhat homogenous. And a lot of them, as we know, are sort of born out of a more Western European tradition and culture. And there seems to be this pressure to go out and find potentially new Canadians or diversity to populate those boards. Yet, to some extent, there's that conflict because it's not their culture. And is there any thoughts on how we sort of, as we look at the way our country is rapidly changing and evolving, how do we start to make investments with people like you into organizations that could perhaps be the next ballet company or the next opera company, but actually are more reflective of what's happening in Canada now?
You know, Vancouver, like the rest of the country, has changed an awful lot over years. And a lot of people from different countries, different cultures, want to become involved in what's going on in Vancouver in particular, in Canada in particular. And I think most people welcome that. I mean, as the audience or the appreciators of what the various outfits do, whether it's art galleries or dance or whatever it is, as the audience has evolved, so should the governance and the suggestions of that. And I think, certainly speaking for Vancouver, which I know better than most of these guys, and they know the other cities better, but that's been an ongoing evolution that's gone very, very well, I think. Very well.
A comment for you. We had the new minister here this morning, and every board needs people who understand the political system and who have relationships. And I've certainly found the boards that I either serve on or lead, our best political connectors have been young people that have been active in the political process. Therefore, another piece of advice is get involved in the democratic process. It needs you. You're a beneficiary of it, and it's an important part of your toolkit if you're going to be really effective in a leadership role. The Liberal Party now has to hire 1,000 new people in Ottawa to fill all of their slots. And I can assure you there are a lot of boards scrambling to find good, bright, young Liberals that are connected into that whole group. So if you're one of them, you're precious.
Andrew, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to crack a joke. There's a great song by a local band called Bowser and Blue. We're all here because we're all not there. I mean, we're all immigrants. We're all from somewhere else. And yes, I agree. We need to better reflect the newer arrivals on our boards on a pan-Canadian basis.
And I'll expand on that a little bit. I think a lot of times for new immigrants, when we're looking at whether it's the ballet company or the opera, and oftentimes we don't see ourselves there. And it's, I believe the earlier panel talked about exposure and getting out there and being a part of it, because the only way to see and experience the culture is to become a part of the culture and not say that you're out of it. One of the, and I'm not here to wave the Soul Pepper flag or anything, but it's one of the organizations we support. And last year, one of the things that Soul Pepper did was they created this Civic Theatre. They wanted to create a place where all Canadians could come and find a home and see theater. And at their gala in 2014, one of the auction items was for, I think it was $500 or $1,000 to allow a new immigrant family to come to Soul Pepper for a year. So that's one way of diversity and including diversity in organizations, because before you can be on the board, you need to understand what the organization is about. So that's one way to begin.
And I'm sure many of you are aware of the art passes, or culture passes, I guess, that are given out to new citizens. And it may be that organizations could try and encourage those new citizens to use those passes. That was our former Governor General, that Adrian Clarkson, that got that started. And I think it's been a very successful program as well. Any more? Yes. Yep, Jane? You need a mic. Although you don't need a mic, but I think we should get you a mic.
Thank you. Unfortunately, in some ways, the days of checkbook philanthropy are gone. So I'd be very interested to know from you as philanthropists, when you write a check to support an arts organization, beyond a tax receipt, what are you looking for when you're making an investment in supporting an arts organization?
I'll take that question. As part of my work, I spent most of my days working with philanthropists and guiding them on making those decisions. And for many of the families that I'm working with who are interested in making philanthropic investment, they're not looking for a tax receipt. I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more is that people want to see impact. They want to see the difference their philanthropic dollars are making. They want to see, it's like any investment, they want to get a return on that investment, and we've been seeing a lot of work and research done in the whole space of social impact. So, and there's a report that comes out, it's called the World Wealth Report, and it talks a lot about ultra high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals, and that place where they've even moved away from calling it philanthropy to saying it's social impact. How are you investing in something that changes lives and that makes a difference? And one of the earlier panel today said that there's a place of just starting. Sometimes we think that you have to write a big check. For a lot of clients that I'm working with, it's a journey, not a destination. I worked with a family that started off gifting about $45,000 in 1 year, and 5 years later they gifted $1 million in a year, and their obligation is over $3 million. So it's that place of the joy of giving and seeing the results of where that check is going, so to speak. Also, a lot of people want to be involved, and people are not simply willing to write a check. They want to understand and be a part of the organization, not in a place of changing the mandate or demanding that, because they understand they're not shareholders in the organization, but partners. And what does a true partner look like?
Okay. Any other comments from the panel?
I could just say that it feeds their passion to feel that their experience actually with the organization and getting to know the product, so to speak, but in whether it's art or whether it's performances on stages or whatever, the value of that experience, almost can't be quantified. That being said, I do agree with Jean that if you're involved over a period of time, you do want to feel that your money is being well managed, that there is good reporting, and there is, significant impact. I couldn't agree more with that, but I think it starts with a really, really deep down satisfaction and a feeling of uplifting feeling that there's almost nothing like the arts can do.
An add-on, we had at Art Summit this year the Deputy Minister of Heritage, Graham Fleck, and one of the key things he said was the government needs data to make decisions, and there's no organization better at producing data than Business for the Arts under Nicole. They inundate you with how many people did this, how many organizations did that. Jane Watson, who just asked a question, is President and CEO of the National Arts Center Foundation. She will bury you in data. Business Artscape, which I chair, believe me, we just produced a book called Momentum. It's just data. And that's what you have to do today. And when the minister said we're going to go digital, I think in large part, it's measurement. So if you're going out there asking for support as an artist or your organization, you've got to have data with you. You've got to have some statistics to put in front of people. And just go online and look at Business for the Arts if you want to see numbers produced in a very effective way.
Yeah, in my case, I see the giving in sort of two categories. The one category is related to hooks. Usually when you're asking for money, you have to find some sort of a hook so that why would that organization give to you rather than to the 100 other organizations that are asking for money as well. So the reverse of that is that you've given to an organization that had a hook on you and that they've somehow realized it. In other words, they've achieved something that you wanted achieved, and so that's positive. The other feeling is giving what I call sustaining gifts. Many organizations require an annual amount that they can count on for their basic sustainability costs. That's not as sexy as the capital gifts or some of the others, but it's so necessary for organizations that I think many philanthropists try to make sure they keep a little bit available to try and make sure that they can keep those sustainability gifts going. Any more? Yep. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Melody. I am the National Co-Chair for Arts Scene, as well as a member of the Arts and Policy Council of the City of Vancouver. I would like to talk about the civic engagement in the arts and your experience in it, because as often as young people, we view the governing body as very bureaucratic, and we're afraid to try to even cut the red tape and open those conversations. What has your experience been in terms of civic engagement in the arts, and what has been the successes and challenges in that space?
Who's been involved civically? Robert?
Yes. Well, the way to get involved civically is, again, through the bureaucracy. So I built a relationship with the bureaucrats at City Hall in Toronto and wound up writing something, Creative Capital Gains Report, which set out the guidelines for arts and culture for the City of Toronto for the last 5 years with 34 recommendations, almost all of which have now been implemented, and we're regenerating that. But that relationship with the bureaucracy, which led to the report, which then led to a relationship with the politicians. But this stuff, you're not going to go in and have a meeting with the mayor and say, gee, we should, and the mayor of your city will say, oh, what a great idea. That won't happen. You've got to work your way up, well, unless it's Rob Ford, but then again.
Yeah, one bit of advice is get to know the executive assistants.
Absolutely. That's the best advice.
We're a little more mellow out west. There you actually can get to know the mayor, and he'll do it.
Now, Nicole just gave me it looked like a throat-slitting motion, which made me think that we're now through. So thank you all very much for your attention and your involvement.